Hey guys, James here from Semajically Productions, and welcome to part 2 of the Semajically AI compilations. This will span episodes 8 to 14. So what you're about to see are the episodes spanning from the magical life of Milton Keynes, the oldest man, all the way up to Matt's incredible journey to 1963. Enjoy!
Hey guys, and welcome back to Semajically AI. This is the 8th episode, and this is the story of Milton Keynes, the oldest man. Here we go. Milton Keynes was born in London in the year 1864 to Stephen Keynes and a supernatural mother that even he didn't know. I'll tell you, his mother was actually a fairy who broke her world's most important law about not actually getting involved with a human's life and having children with them. When Milton was born, Stephen had everything to be proud of, but wasn't allowed to reveal to his son who his mother was until he was old enough to understand it. In 1865, after a year of living quietly, Chronica, Milton's mother, was arrested by her world's council and sent back there to stand trial. Milton was only a year old at the time, so he didn't understand what was going on. In 1869, Milton began his basic education under the tutelage of Mr. Richard Armstrong, who would tutor him in literacy, maths and social skills by bringing his young daughter Jane to share his lessons and play with him, and the two became fast friends. In 1875, as he turned 11, Milton was invited to attend Sherlock School for the next 7 years, and he accepted his place at the school. Jane, on the other hand, was going to St. Albright School for Girls, as Richard didn't trust co-educational schools, so the friends were separated during their school years. They didn't like it, but were forced to accept it with the promise to reunite every holiday, and after they'd left school. Between 1875 and 1882, Milton attended Sherlock School as a member of Ambrose House. He excelled in his studies and was the best behaved student in the school, becoming a dormitory monitor in his 3rd year, prefect in his 5th, and head boy in his 7th. He ran the corridors with an iron fist. At the same time, Jane was attending St. Albright School for Girls as a member of Angel Wing's house, and a very studious pupil. She went against the rules, becoming a junior prefect in her 3rd year, senior prefect in her 5th, and head girl in her 7th. They kept their promise to reunite every holiday, Christmas, Easter and summer. By the time they left their respective schools in 1882, they were thrilled to be fully reunited. Realizing they were in love, they started dating. In 1884, he married Jane, and it was, the happiest day of their lives. He was also now a bank officer, and they had a steady flow of income. They were a very happy couple and loved each other very much. In 1886, he became a father to a son named Michael, and they loved him to pieces. In 1889, he became a father to a daughter named Mary, and they loved her to absolute pieces. Their family was now complete, as they'd only planned to have a small family. In 1898, Jane joined the suffragette movement in an attempt to give women equal rights with men. Milton was actually in favour of this movement, as he believed it was unfair for women to be treated as inferior to men. In 1903, after many years of wondering who his birth mother was, he got confirmation when he came into possession of a photograph of him as a baby with both of his parents. He saw from it that his birth mother had been a fairy, as he could see by the wings she was keeping still. This shocked him to the core. He was half fairy, and he was only just learning this now, after 39 years. Why couldn't it have been sooner? He was furious with his father for keeping this from him all these years. Jane tried to calm down, but she couldn't, and neither could their children, Mike and Mary, who were mesmerized by this revelation. Their paternal grandmother was a real fairy, an actual magical being, but sadly they were never going to meet her, as her race executed her for having a child with a human. In his fury, Milton unleashed a powerful wave of magic, which ended up freezing time. After realizing this, he released a second wave, resuming time. Years went by as Mike and Mary grew up and left home to start their own lives, going on to have families of their own, making him a proud grandfather, and he adored his grandchildren. In 1923, Jane passed away from a terminal illness which was very devastating, and he went into a very deep depression. In 1932, he decided to write his will and had it looked over by his lawyer. In 1933, he retired from his job at the bank to live quietly with the rest of his family. In 1935, he willingly moved into a retirement home as he felt he needed to be there. Many more years passed, and he found himself burying his children and then his grandchildren, all before he died, devastated by the knowledge that he'd outlived all of his loved ones. He saw all his milestone birthdays, 75 in 1939-80, in 1944-85, in 1949-90, in 1954-95, in 1959-100, in 1964, and so on and so on. He reached his 150th birthday in 2014, which amazed both him and everyone in the world. His health started to decline a year later, but this was a very slow process. Here we are now in 2024, and Milton is currently 160 years old and still alive, but only just. Oh no, he's just passed away. Wait a minute, what's happening? He's levitating and his body is rejuvenating and revitalizing him. This must be his magical blood taking control and bringing him back to life as a magical being.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Semajically AI. This is the 9th episode, and tonight we try something different. Rather than presenting one story, we have two of them for you in anthology. Let's get on with it. The Wishing Slide. What if I told you there was a park just down the street from this ordinary house that contained a slide that could grant the wishes of anyone who used it? Before you go blabbing it about, this was a very special slide indeed that stood in an otherwise ordinary playground. And this is what a group of youngsters found out when they decided to test out their speed sliding down it. Their names were Joe Clive, Zena Bones, Simon Bridges, and Lolly Sweet.
As she sat at the top, she slid down at her top speed, and without thinking, she said she could teleport and found herself standing by the swings.
They were all shocked and wanted to know how she did that.
Simon took the next go, being the middle child of the group, as he slid down at his top speed, just wishing privately that he could travel through time, only to suddenly vanish from the playground altogether. But he was just there at the top of slide. How could he just vanish into thin air?
Zena took her go as the second oldest of her group. As she slid down at her top, she said how cool it would be to see through time, and no sooner had she said it, she got a vision of the near future and saw Simon catching up with them as they were walking home at 6:30 that evening before her focus returned to the present as the oldest of group. Joe took his turn.
As he slid down at his top speed, he wished he could have an expanded lifespan, but didn't specify how much extra life he wanted. So he was granted an unspecified extension to his lifespan, complete with healing abilities.
At 6:30 that evening, as they were walking home, Simon caught up with them, just as Zena had predicted. All four friends discussed the slide and the powers it had given them. As they crossed the road, a motorcycle rushed by, running over Joe, killing him instantly. But not for long, as he regained consciousness and got to his feet, healing from his injuries as they made it to the other side. The slide had granted all of them their wishes. Lolly could now teleport, Simon could now travel through time, Zena could now see into time, and Joe could now live much longer than anyone and heal from his injuries. As he didn't specify a length for the extension to his life to last, it could last another 2 centuries, or he might now be immortal, who knows. Walk into the future. Ray Jones was a young man who was very happy in his life. He was just starting his career as a history teacher and lived with his loving girlfriend Melinda Cork, who was a junior doctor who had just started her job at the local hospital. They both had the day off that Tuesday, so they decided to go for a walk. As they started walking down their street, they felt an odd sensation. That's when they rounded a corner to see a flying car jetting overhead and found themselves staring at cars that looked like flying saucers parked in landing bays and kids floating around in bubbles.
Wondering what was going on, they entered the newsagent to query it, only for the shopkeeper to recognize them despite never having seen them before, or so they thought as they saw the name on the shopkeeper's name tag and realized it was his future self. A middle-aged woman appeared behind the counter and recognized them too. This was the future version of Melinda. They checked the date on the closest newspaper, only to discover that they'd walked through time into the year 2045. They'd traveled 21 years into the future, which freaked them out. That's when 2 teenagers approached them, a boy and a girl. Their names were Leroy and Olivia, their own future children. Deciding they'd seen enough, they finally left the shop and went back the way they came. And sure enough, they returned to their present time of 2024. They decided not to share details of their time travel walk, as nobody would ever believe them.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Semajically AI. This is the 10th episode and head straight to our next story, Ryan Morgan and the monster on the chair. Ever since Ryan Morgan was small, he has been scared to death of the idea of monsters hiding in cupboards and under beds. He just didn't like them at all, even though he knew they weren't real. He was 26 years old now, and had no friends because of his childhood fear which had been plaguing him for the past 2 decades. It was due to this that he couldn't be trusted to live on his own, so he had a carer who shared his flat with him. Her name was Darcy, and she was always telling him monsters didn't exist, but he didn't believe her. One night, as he was getting ready for bed, he had Darcy check his cupboards and under his bed for monsters, but there weren't any, thankfully. She tucked him in like a little boy and promised him nothing was going to happen to him before kissing him goodnight and leaving him to fall asleep. As he started to settle down, he noticed a horrible, monstrous face staring at him from the chair in the corner of the room. "The only monster in this room is a very naughty boy who won't settle down," she said calmly as she tucked him in for the 2nd time that night. "Stay put this time and no more of this nonsense about monsters," she told him before leaving the room again. He crawled to the end of his bed and unmasked the monster, only to learn it was just a doll with an ugly face. He thought about it for a moment and laughed silently to himself. He couldn't believe he'd been scared of something so ridiculous. It was finally over. No more stupid, childish fears existed in him anymore. Hey guys, and welcome back to Semajically AI. This is the 11th episode, and we have our first sequel story in Beach Incident 2, The Aftermath. We return to Midhampton Beach, where the 4 immortals had just intervened in an incident that young Luke Stenner was caught causing and were still disciplining him for his dangerous behavior. Part of this involved revealing their immortality and proving it to him. His parents, Alex and Tricia, had since rushed his sister Amanda to the hospital while the immortals were telling him off. The lifeguard was currently telling him off for what he'd done, and was even threatening to ban him from the beach forever.
"Give me one good reason why I shouldn't banish you from this beach for good,"
he scolded. Luke just stood there looking up at him with his eyes screwed up. Ty called a sweet voice from behind him. It was Lily Barrett, the teenage daughter of James and Millie Barrett. She was the youngest of their 3 children, a 14-year-old who had come to hand in a lost necklace belonging to Amanda.
"Yes, Lily, what can I do for you?"
"This is Amanda Stenner's necklace. She must have been wearing it during the incident."
Before we carry on, I must do 2 things. Firstly, I remind you that the Stenners were created by my best friend Darren Stratton. He's just letting us use them. Thanks, brother. I appreciate it. And secondly, to confirm the lifeguard's full name is Ty Denton. Back to the story now, and Lily had handed in Amanda Stenner's lost necklace and further incriminated Luke, who came running straight for her, but she stopped him.
"Don't you dare even try to do to me what you did to your sister." You are a very violent little monster.
she scolded, giving him a karate chop which knocked him into the hands of Officer Geraint Reinsgate, who arrested him on the spot. So, Luke Stenner had been arrested for dangerous behavior, but he couldn't be sent to prison because he was underage, despite being criminally responsible.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Semajically AI. This is the 12th episode, and this is our story for tonight, Hampton County: The Origins. Our story begins in the year 1823, and a boat docked in a fresh new area where 3 different sized settlements stood ready to be settled in and built up. 3 siblings disembarked and looked around themselves. These were the Hampton siblings, Rupert, Midge, and Lewis. They were looking to 3 new communities in those settlements. They agreed to each whichever settlement compared to how old they were. Rupert was the oldest of the 3, so he took the largest settlement and started making it his own, naming it Upper Hampton, as he thought calling it Ruperton was a ridiculous idea. Midge was the middle child of the 3, so she took the middle-sized settlement, making it her own, and naming it Midhampton, thinking Middleton was a ridiculous name. And Lewis was the youngest of 3, so he took the smallest settlement, making it his own and naming it Lower Hampton, thinking Lewiston was a very stupid name. No sooner had they each done that, they came together at the border to the area, agreeing to call it Hampton County. People started moving into the 3 settlements, and Upper Hampton became a city, Midhampton, a town, and Lower Hampton, a village. All of this had taken place by 1830. In 1835, it was decided that a transit system was needed for people to travel from place to place, so they established a railway network. By 1837, Rupert was married to a woman named Stella, and they had a daughter named Jane. He was the only sibling to marry and have a family of his own. In 1839, they welcomed their second daughter Amelia to the world, completing their little family. An education system was set up in 1843, with a 1-room schoolhouse and a 2-room college building, which was successful for the next half-decade. By 1848, the school and college had been expanded to accommodate more students and faculty, and a university was set up in Upper Hampton to train young adults for jobs in finance, law, real estate, transportation, and more. They treated everyone equally, including the women, which made them the first to ever do that, earning them commendation for their achievements. By 1860, the communities all came together to celebrate their accomplishments and successes. Even young Jane and Amelia were very proud of their father, aunt, and uncle for all their accomplishments. Remember that Jane and Amelia were Rupert's daughters, who were 11 and 13 at the time, and they loved their lives. 30 years later, Jane was married to a man named Bob and had a son named Jack, while Amelia was married to a man named David Black and had 2 daughters named Millie and Molly, who they loved to bits. That's the story of the early years of Hampton County.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Semajically AI. This is the 13th episode, and we have our second sequel episode. The mysterious life of Destiny continues. Destiny had only lived with her adoptive parents, Steve and Melanie, for a couple of months, and was already feeling comfortable with them. Their family name was Libman and had allowed her to keep her original surname as a sign of respect for her dead birth parents. They loved her to pieces and wanted nothing but the best for her. Steve had pulled some strings to get her enrolled at his old school, and she was starting there the next term. The 1893 autumn term at Sir Roger's Academy was fast approaching, and she was looking forward to starting there. September soon came, and she was off to school for the first time and straight away made some friends on the school coaches, which at this time were horse-drawn carriages driven by coachmen hired by her school themselves. The head teacher was there to welcome back the existing students and welcome the new ones, including Destiny, who was the first girl to ever be accepted into the school. She was placed in the Bright Sparks class, and it soon became apparent just how right they were to place her there, as she began to pick up on what she was learning and excelling in them. Over the next 7 years, she excelled in whatever difficulty of classes she was placed in, and pioneering the school now co-educational reform, as there were now just as many girls at that school as there were boys. By the time she was 16 years old, she was ready to leave the school and enter the real world. It was the summer of 1900, and her parents, Steve and Melanie, were very proud of her for how far she'd come in the 7 years since they first took her into their home and decided to raise her as their daughter. While they were praising her, she had a vision of herself 15 years from then with a family of her own, before snapping back to the present and hugging them, saying she loved them to bits and really appreciated everything they'd done for her. They went home and spent the afternoon having a lovely time together, playing games and laughing. A few days later, she was out for a walk when she met a handsome teenage boy named Terry Ball, who thought she was the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen. They spent time getting to know each other, realizing just how compatible they were to each other, and started an official relationship. Steve and Melanie were very happy to see their daughter happy and gave her permission to marry Terry when they were ready. In summer 1902, Destiny married Terry, and it was the best day of their lives. Steve and Melanie were very proud to see their newly married daughter and son-in-law so happy to finally be husband and wife. Destiny and Terry honeymooned in Scotland for 2 weeks before settling down in their new house just down the road from Steve and Melanie, as they wanted to live closer to their family. Hey guys, and welcome to Semajically AI. This is the 14th episode, and we have our second time travel story, Time Tossed, Matt's incredible journey to 1963. It all started one busy Wednesday morning as Matt Bolon arrived at work while his boss was briefing the team on their jobs that day. He learned that he was to run errands all day as punishment for being late, so he got started immediately by hitting the streets to start as errand boy for his boss that day, as he rushed back and forth delivering things to other companies. The day went on as he did errand after errand and started being careless with his safety, as he rushed out instead of watching out, only to be struck by a car, knocking him down and causing him whack his head on the ground. His focus started to go blurry and he passed out. When he came to, he found himself sitting in a little green spot on a bright sunny day. He stooped up and looked around himself, dazed and confused. The air around was fresh and he could smell the sea nearby, and walked across to a beach full of people having fun with their families. He walked into the town and found himself surrounded by people dressed in clothes that looked at least 60 years out of date, and cars that looked like they should be at least 60 years old but looked brand new. How could this be possible, he thought as he processed what he saw. As he passed a newspaper stand and saw a newspaper dated for July the 25th, 1963, he stood staring at it, hardly daring to believe it. Was he mad or in a coma, or had he traveled back in time? He decided to keep these thoughts to himself as he stopped to talk to a policeman who was very friendly and concerned about him. He escorted him to the police station to question him, and that's when he had to tell him he wasn't from the area. Or he was, but he was not from the time period. Intrigued, the policeman asked him what year he thought he was from, and he gave the possibility of him either sitting in a police station in 1963 or lying in a hospital bed in 2024, and none of this being real. The policeman laughed at him for thinking he was from 61 years in the future and locked him up, telling him what he was saying couldn't be true. Matt decided to show him his driver's license to prove his identity. The policeman looked at it in confusion at the birth date. November 6, 1998, he thought. Matt then showed him his mobile phone, which was the latest model of iPhone, which wouldn't be invented for another 60 years, and he himself wouldn't be born for another 35. Upon learning Matt was telling the truth, the police released him and offered him protection, as he was going to be famous for being a time traveler. And sure enough, when the press found out about a young man from the future who was now stuck in a time that was not his own and reported on it, people wanted to meet Matt Bolon, the man from the future, and ask exactly how he ended up there. But that information was classified, so they started making up their own versions of the circumstances by which he ended up there. None of them were correct, not even close. How was he going to get home? There was no known way, other than to live through time until he'd aged back to that point.
And that's it for another compilation of Semajically AI. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Because if you did, there will be more to come. Now, I thought I should also sign out by saying that just because some of you don't like characters who appear in these videos, that doesn't give you the right if you choose to watch them, because you can choose not to. If you choose to watch them, then don't comment complaining about a character you don't like and telling me I can't use those characters. Because this is my show, my channel, I can do what I like. And if you don't like what you see, just go and watch something else. Anyway, for those of you who are enjoying these videos, please like, comment, share and subscribe. And until next time, thanks for watching and have a magical time.